2nd of May, 1957, Frank Costello, head of the Luciano crime family, had enjoyed a dinner with friends in an East Side restaurant. He took a cab to his apartment, the Majestic, on the fashionable Upper West Side of New York's Central Park. As Costello entered the lobby, a large man stepped out of the shadows, raised his arm, and said, "This is for you, Frank." This organized hit on a top mafia boss would signal the rise of the most dangerous gangster in America, Vito Genovese.
Vito Genovese was never anything but a homicidal maniac.
Probably the most despicable gangster ever to run the streets of this city.
But Genovese's rise would also be a major turning point in the history of the Mafia. And his actions would bring down the full force of the FBI on the mob.
Are you going to have anything to say, Mr. Genovese?
Is it true that you're the head of the Mafia in this country?
It is not.
Vito Genovese arrived in New York from Naples when he was 15 years old and joined the thousands of other Italian immigrants to hit the city's shores at the turn of the century.
Genovese grew up in the slums of New York. From the beginning, he was involved in these terrifying street gangs. Violence ruled, and he never changed.
Genovese was a product of the gutter of New York City. He was constantly in conflict. Everything had to be out of the barrel of a gun. That was Genovese.
Police records show that over the next 10 years, Genovese was charged with shooting a man in Queens, running down and killing a man in Brooklyn, having a loaded revolver tucked into his belt on the Lower East Side, and murdering another hoodlum.
Vito Genovese, I'll give you a great example of what he did. He fell in love with a woman named Anna, who was married to someone else. Genovese and his thugs threw her husband off a roof so he could marry her, and he married her.
Murder was just a ritual with him. He had no conscience.
This appetite for killing did not go unnoticed. By the mid-1920s, Genovese was a hitman for the greatest mafia boss of them all, Charles Lucky Luciano.
Vito Genovese rose to the top by intimidation, and the guy who allowed him to do that was Lucky Luciano. Lucky Luciano used Vito Genovese as his intimidator.
Luciano may have looked very cultivated, but he needed hitmen. And when he needed hitmen, one of the first people he turned to was Vito Genovese.
By 1931, Genovese was acknowledged as Lucky Luciano's right-hand man and underboss, and was one of the key hitmen sent by Luciano to kill rival boss Giuseppe Masseria. Such was his reputation that Genovese was known as Don Vito, the Great Vito. And in 1936, Genovese got the chance to take the top job. When Mafia boss Luciano was convicted on prostitution charges and sent to prison for 50 years.
When Lucky was convicted and sentenced to a long prison term, Vito considered himself to be the heir apparent.
But things didn't go to plan. Genovese now also found himself being pursued.
Vito Genovese had been involved in a murder in the early 1930s and somehow had managed to beat the rap.
The victim had been one of Genovese's gangsters who had demanded too big a share of a crooked card game. Now an informer came forward and pointed the finger at Genovese as the man who had ordered the hit. Just as he was about to take control of the Luciano family, Genovese was forced to flee to Italy to escape the murder charge and the electric chair. With Genovese now out of the picture, Luciano sent word from his prison cell for Frank Costello to step in as boss. Just like Genovese, Frank Costello was born in Italy. He was 4 years old when he arrived in East Harlem with his parents in 1900. His father ran a grocery shop, and from an early age, Costello despised his humbleness. He loathed the way his father was willing to settle for a life of poverty. Costello chose the streets rather than work with his father and joined one of the violent gangs of New York. In 1915, Costello was arrested and sentenced to a year in jail for carrying a gun. But this event changed him and would make him a very different man to Genovese. On his release, Costello decided to use his brains, not bullets, to get ahead.
The people that he worked with were prone to violence, almost by definition, and he understood that murders were bad for business.
He would never be a kind of hitman, goon, a muscle man type. He was a gentleman gangster. He was never going to be a thug. And he also latched on to something called slot machines.
By the 1930s, Frank Costello was known to the underworld as King of the Slots. His illegal one-armed bandit machines were grossing $500,000 a day.
He made millions. It established him as somebody who was known as an earner, not a guy who goes out and has to commit hits or violent crimes.
With Genovese gone, Frank Costello was a very powerful man. He was now the head of the New York Mafia, the largest mob family in America, with more than 400 soldiers beneath him. Costello easily filled Luciano's shoes and continued to add billions of dollars to the family's fortunes. Far away in Italy, Genovese was just trying to make his way. It is said that when he fled the US on the murder charge, he had $750,000 in his trunk. Genovese was going to need it. Benito Mussolini, the head of the National Fascist Party in Italy, was fiercely against the Sicilian Mafia. But Genovese would soon discover that he was open to offers.
Genovese cottoned up to Benito Mussolini by providing money, providing donations to fascist buildings, and he even managed to pull off a hit for Mussolini in New York. There was a newspaper which had been a persistent critic of Mussolini. He went to Don Vito Genovese, who got word to his killers in New York, and they murdered the editor.
As a reward for Genovese's donations and services, Mussolini gave him an Italian knighthood.
But of course, Mussolini was known for shooting mafiosos, and so he could never really relax.
When World War II began, Genovese seized another opportunity.
And he was a pretty crafty guy, Genovese. Turned out he worked both for the Axis and for the Allies.
When the Americans invaded Sicily in 1943, Mussolini was overthrown. So Genovese quickly switched sides and became an interpreter and advisor to the US military government.
They thought he was doing them a favor. What he was really doing, he was running a black marketeering scheme. He was stealing supplies from army bases by corrupting army officers and selling it on the black market in Italy.
But for all his Sicilian success, Genovese was still wanted for the card game killing, and the New York police had new evidence implicating him. A man called Peter Latempa had come forward, claiming he had heard Genovese planning the murder. He was now held in protective custody as chief witness against Genovese. The American authorities finally caught up with Genovese in Naples in August 1944. Genovese was brought back to New York to face the murder charge. But he had no intention of taking the rap. On the 16th of January, 1945, Latempa complained that he was suffering from a gallstone problem. He was given painkillers by his guards. Two hours later, he was dead. The toxicologist who had examined his body reported that he had been given enough sedatives to kill 8 horses. With Latempa out of the way, there was no case against Genovese. The judge told him, "I cannot speak for the jury, but I believe if there was a shred of corroborating evidence, you would have been condemned to the chair. By devious means, you have thwarted justice time and time again." Genovese was acquitted. Vito Genovese was back on the streets, but he was not the boss. The man in charge was still his old rival, Frank Costello, and he was thriving.
Frank Costello fashioned himself as a non-gangster. He fashioned himself as a businessman, sometimes bordering on aristocracy.
He mixed with politicians, congressmen, journalists, authors, judges, cops, and city councillors. With his connections, Costello developed a reputation as the boss who could bridge the legitimate world and the mob. The Salvation Army even made him their vice chairman. Genovese could only watch from the sidelines as Costello became a real New York player.
Genovese was intimidated by Costello's intelligence. He knew that Costello could get, with words, what he could only get out of a gun. And he was jealous of that.
Such was his power that before a judge could be appointed, it had to be cleared by Frank Costello.
He didn't just know judges and DAs and politicians, he bought them.
Potential mayoral candidates in the Democratic Party went to see him hat in hand, asking for his blessings.
He was an absolute corrupter.
When the Mafia gets control of your political and judicial system, when they're deciding what bills are passed, they're deciding how justice is meted out, then you're in danger. Frank Costello, even though he dressed well, looked civilized, looked cultivated, was one of the most dangerous mafiosi in American history.
Costello became known as the Prime Minister.
That title was given to him by the media. They made Frank Costello the American Winston Churchill in the underworld.
That doesn't mean he was boss of bosses. There was no such position. But as a prime minister is in most countries, he was the first among equals, and sometimes a little more equal than they were.
Genovese seemed to be out of it, but he realized that Costello was making a big mistake. He preferred to deal only with the big guys, but ignored the little guys.
Frank Costello neglected the troops. Frank Costello only concerned himself with the capos. And the capos is Italian for captain.
Members of crews that had been loyal complained. They had been neglected, that Costello didn't favor them.
Genovese saw this resentment as his opportunity to begin undermining Costello's leadership.
The soldiers, the button men in the family knew that Vito Genovese was the real deal, whereas Costello was a person who was a little out of touch. Vito Genovese never lost sight of the fact that he was a criminal, and Frank Costello lost sight of that fact. Frank Costello started to believe his own imagery, his own myth.
Everybody knew that Genovese wanted Frank's job, but he couldn't take the job. The other bosses wouldn't have allowed that as long as Frank was riding high. Frank had the connections. Genovese did not have the connection.
So what he does is he begins to make sure he's strong, that his rackets are beginning to produce money. So he has both money, and he has soldiers, and he has hitmen, in case there's a real showdown.
Now, Genovese was waiting and hoping Costello would make a wrong move. He wouldn't have to wait long. In 1950, an ambitious Democrat senator from Tennessee named Estes Kefauver headed a committee to investigate organized crime in America. Kefauver called on more than 600 gangsters, underworld figures, politicians, and policemen to testify before them. The country was transfixed as the hearings hit the headlines and television channels.
I remember the Kefauver investigations. I was a very young lad, and I remember actually watching those, and it was a real revelation. We began to see that there was these people among us, criminals, who were very well organized and very deliberate in their activities, and controlled a great deal of the criminal activity in this country.
Many of the witnesses refused to say anything, but not Frank Costello. He agreed to answer questions.
He thought he could go on the witness stand and come out as a gentleman, as a real businessman. And that he had this kind of outlook or outward appearance that he wouldn't look like a ruffian, like a hoodlum.
And Costello, billed as the most influential underworld leader in America, became the star attraction. But then, Costello made a miscalculation. He surprised everybody by insisting that his face shouldn't be shown on television, and the committee instructed the broadcasters to respect his request.
The television is not on any part of Mr. Costello.
The only option left open for the TV crews was to film his hands. and the subsequent images of Costello's testimony became known as the hand ballet. Whenever the questions about his criminal activities got too tough or too near the knuckle, Costello would rub his palms together, tighten his fingers, grip a glass of water, drum on the table in front of him, or crumple and tear pieces of paper. And although the television cameras were not allowed to show Costello's face, the newsreel cameras and press photographers had no such restrictions.
Mr. Costello is going to face the camera and let you have a good look at Mr. Costello. As the photographer says to the little boy, can you smile a little bit?
Has this country come up to your anticipations? What have you ever done for your country as a good citizen?
Well, I don't know what you claim, what you mean by that.
Well, you're looking back over the years now to that time when you became a citizen, and we're now standing 20-odd years after that. You must have in your mind some things you've done that you can speak of to your credit as an American citizen. If so, what are they?
Paid my tax.
I pay my taxes. That was his answer. Now, in his mind, he thought that was enough. He didn't think that he had to join the Army or the Marine Corps. I pay my taxes. Everybody pays their taxes, they're working for their country. But he was the original superstar made by television.
Ridiculed and humiliated, Costello finally refused to answer any further questions and produced a note from his doctor.
A certificate of a doctor who examined Mr. Costello this morning.
All right.
I'm in no condition to testify from here in until I'm well enough.
You refuse to testify further?
Absolutely. When I testify, I want to testify truthfully. And I can't, my mind don't function.
Costello had been publicly destroyed by the exposure, and he left the Kefauver committee hearings as the Justice Department's #1 target.
Once he failed at Kefauver, everybody went after him. He was indicted for tax evasion, he was convicted. He was indicted for lying to Congress. When you are the prime minister, the man who can work the miracles, and all of a sudden you fall off your horse and fall on your face, you are not prime minister anymore.
Frank Costello paid the price of television. By him appearing in front of the Kefauver committee hearing and it being televised, that was the beginning of the end of Frank Costello. In fact, that was the beginning of the end of the mob. It took many, many years, and Frank Costello was the beginning of it because it brought the attention of the general public to what the mob was actually doing.
But for one mobster, Costello's failure was good news. Vito Genovese. And he was going to make the most of it.
One of the things he does, he starts bumping off, killing Costello's hitmen.
The first on his list was one of Costello's top hitmen, Willie Moore Moretti. Moretti had grown up with Costello in East Harlem and was now a feared New Jersey racketeer with his own army of 60 soldiers. He was also one of Costello's strongest supporters. But this planned execution wasn't just business. It was highly personal. Moretti had been promoted to Costello's underboss, his second in command. This meant that Genovese had been bumped down to just the captain of his old crew. Genovese had chosen his target well. Moretti was suffering from advanced syphilis, which was spreading to his brain. This had the worrying effect of freeing up his speech, and it was now feared that he would start talking to the press. Genovese used this to his advantage. Because of Moretti's condition, he approached the Commission, the Mafia's board of directors, and asked for their permission for a mercy killing. The Commission was set up by Lucky Luciano in 1931 as a democratic system for dealing with all the mob's affairs. It operated by strict rules. No boss could be hit without the Commission's permission. And they gave it to him. The hit would take place on the morning of the 5th of October, 1951, as ordinary New Yorkers went about their business. Genovese had now made it quite clear to Costello that he was coming after him, and Costello was in no position to fight back. He was locked in continual combat with the US authorities over contempt of court and failure to pay his taxes. Over the next 6 years, Costello was in and out of jail. When he came out on bail in March 1957, Genovese finally decided to strike.
Genovese many times tried to get the okay of the Commission to kill Costello.
But the Commission wouldn't give it. So Genovese decided to hit Costello anyway. Genovese now studied Costello's routine. The 66-year-old Costello took cabs or walked to his various meetings around the city like he'd always done, without the aid of bodyguards or bulletproof cars. It made him an easy target.
Other bosses had an army of bodyguards around them. Costello said, if they're going to kill you, that's the first ones they'll bribe.
Genovese gave the contract to Vincent Gigante, who was a former prize fighter, who became Genovese's chauffeur. He was a real thug, tough guy. I mean, he'd kill you at the drop of a hat. He was the mirror image of a Genovese. Genovese liked him for that. He was just a ruthless killer.
On the evening of May the 2nd, 1957, Frank Costello enjoyed a dinner with some friends in an East Side restaurant. After the meal, he took a cab to his apartment.
Now, Costello lived in a very upscale apartment that overlooked Central Park. It was known as the Majestic Apartments. Costello was so sure of himself, even though he knew Genovese was around. And he came home one night, walked into his lobby, and he was met by Gigante.
Gigante raised his gun and yelled, "This is for you, Frank." Costello was covered with blood when he reached the Roosevelt Hospital. But the bullet had only shaved his skull. One of Genovese's top soldiers, Joe Valachi, later observed that Gigante had wasted a whole month practicing.
There's some debate on whether Gigante missed him on purpose or he just missed him out of ineptness. I choose the latter. He just missed him. But there's a rule in the mob. If you try and you miss, you don't try again.
The doorman of the Majestic identified Gigante as Costello's hitman. Gigante quickly gave himself up and was put on trial for attempted murder. This was a very dangerous time for Genovese. If Costello confirmed it was Gigante, police would come after him. But at the trial, Costello observed the Mafia rule of omerta, the code of silence, and told the jury that he didn't recognize Gigante. Gigante was acquitted, and as he left the court, he walked over to Costello, held out his hand, and said, "Thanks, Frank." Genovese knew that Costello alive posed a grave threat to him, and he heard that he was secretly meeting with the Lord High Executioner of Murder Incorporated, Albert Anastasia. Guns, ice picks, and strangling ropes were his stock in trade.
He was a tough, ruthless man, not at all like Costello, who was his good friend. If there had been a move against Costello with Anastasia still alive, there would have been a counterattack by Anastasia.
Genovese decided to strike first. The problem was getting to Anastasia. He lived in a New Jersey mansion, guarded by ferocious dogs and barbed wire fences, and always traveled with bodyguards. Genovese needed somebody on the inside, and he approached Carlo Gambino, then an ambitious Anastasia lieutenant, and convinced him they would both be better off with Anastasia dead. On the morning of October 25th, 1957, at 10:15 a.m., Albert Anastasia walked into a barber shop in Midtown Manhattan. His bodyguards parked the car in an underground garage and then took a walk. Anastasia closed his eyes and relaxed into the barber's chair. Two men in suits with scarves covering their lower faces walked up behind him. Anastasia was literally blasted out of the chair. Genovese now sprang into action. He immediately announced that he was the head of the family. And straight away, he turned on his old adversary, Frank Costello.
Costello knew what it meant. His time was over. His reign was complete. That if he didn't surrender or abdicate, he was going to be assassinated.
Genovese stripped Costello of all his gambling assets and interests in Las Vegas, Florida, the Caribbean, and New York. He only allowed Costello to live on the one condition that he get out and never be involved with the rackets again.
Costello sent a message to Vito Genovese, Don Vito, it's yours. You're in control.
Genovese had done it. He was now the boss of the largest mafia family in New York. But he was also in deep trouble. Blinded by ruthless ambition, he had ordered 2 hits on 2 mafia leaders without the okay from their governing body, the Commission. And he had done something else that some commission members found uncomfortable. Genovese had also moved big time into drug dealing.
Genovese always thought that narcotics was a good deal for the mob.
Within the Luciano family, he was in charge of drug trafficking.
But Congress had recently passed tough new drug laws, and many mafia bosses were worried about the consequences.
Drugs brought heat. And what I mean by heat is that if you dealt drugs and you got bagged and you're facing a lot of time in jail, you're going to roll, you're going to become a rat.
Well, you could get up to 30 years in prison.
They felt that if they kept their hand on the drugs, they would be able to avoid that.
The mafia heads around the country now feared that Genovese was a loose cannon who didn't play by the rules. And his drug trafficking operations could bring the FBI down on them. To save his skin, Genovese requested a meeting of the commission to explain his recent actions in New York.
The commission was not supposed to call another national convention, which would be held every 5 years for 4 more years. But Genovese insisted that the bosses from all the other families and the New York families had to assemble because of these important developments in New York, and he wanted it known that he was the boss of a family. So they picked the same place they had met the previous year. There had been a national convention in a small town in upstate New York known as Apalachin.
It would prove to be the biggest mistake of Genovese's life. On November the 14th, 1957, more than 60 senior mafia bosses with their advisors and bodyguards traveled from Cuba, Italy, and from all over the United States to a hilltop estate in a small, sleepy hamlet called Appalachin, 180 miles northwest of New York City and far from the prying eyes and surveillance of the city cops. Appalachin was the home of mafia boss Joseph Barbera. His guests would include all the most powerful members of the mafia, like Joe Bonanno, Carmine Galante, Sam Giancana, and Joe Profaci. And at the head of the table, Don Vito Genovese.
Appalachin meeting was a meeting of mobsters from all over the country. Keep in mind that the mob, as we know it today, and as it was formed in 1931, was 100% controlled by the 5 families in New York. All the other cities were ancillary that answered to the New York mobsters.
But local detective Sergeant Edgar Croswell of the New York State Police had been watching the events.
The local police noticed something strange. All these out-of-towners and dozens of cars were pulling into one farmhouse in a remote area.
Croswell's suspicions had been aroused when he noticed that Barbera was booking up the local hotel. They'd also been tipped off by a local food supplier that Barbera had ordered 20 pounds of steak, 20 pounds of veal cutlets, and 15 pounds of cold cuts that day. Croswell had been keeping a close eye on Barbera, as he knew he had mob connections. He called for backup.
Well, we get the call, send as many people as you can to Appalachin. We have a thing going on.
Croswell ordered his troopers to surround the house.
We had a lot of people that they thought was the underworld, and we were to pick them up.
And when the guests got the news, there was blind panic. Some rushed to their cars. Others fled through the woods, ripping their silk suits against the brambles as they ran. Croswell sent his troopers in after them.
We saw one fella, he was standing on the back porch of a local house, but he wore a nice Homburg hat, and he had a nice overcoat with a fur collar. And we knew right away that he didn't fit in. We went in and took control of him and put him in the troop car with us.
Croswell and his men eventually managed to round up 60 Mafia members, including New York leaders Profaci, Bonanno, Galante, and Campino.
Everybody had the same excuse that they heard Barbera was sick, and they all dropped in to see him, pay their respects.
Here you had this obvious convention of Italian or Sicilian American mobsters, and you couldn't dismiss it just as a casual meeting and the claim by all of them that they went to visit a sick friend. I mean, nobody could swallow that.
The Justice Department believed that at least 50 escaped, including Chicago boss Sam Giancana. Apalachin was the largest Mafia meeting ever rumbled by American police, and the mob would never hold one of this size again. Far from Genovese's triumphant moment announcing to the commission his ascension to the head of the Luciano crime family, he had exposed them all to the authorities. As a direct result of Apalachin, a federal grand jury found 20 Mafia members guilty of conspiracy to commit perjury and to obstruct justice, and imposed sentences of between 3 and 5 years. Eventually, these were overturned by the United States Court of Appeals on the basis of insufficient evidence. But the damage had been done. Genovese had awakened a sleeping giant. The FBI.
This is the FBI. The house is surrounded. Back out that door with your hands up. Never mind.
And it hit them like a bombshell.
I think the Appalachian organized crime meeting, the meeting of the bosses of America's organized crime in one location, really brought home to the American public and to the FBI the magnitude of this problem.
Up to this point, the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, had been reluctant to admit the existence of organized crime in America. He had even written, "There was no such thing as organized crime or the Mafia, and the claim that there was a national crime syndicate was baloney."
All of a sudden, everything that they had been saying, that there was no national organization, that crime was essentially local and it was up for local law enforcement to deal with, became obviously incorrect.
They were so brazen, they were so bold and so powerful that they would actually have a meeting, much as any large, legitimate American corporation would meet to decide internal issues, if you will, of their organization, their direction, what they wanted to do in the way of a legitimate company would do. This really imprinted itself on the American public and certainly on the FBI.
That was it for the FBI. I mean, if there was a moment where it was absolutely patently clear that they had a role to do that they had not been performing, that was it.
All this changed after Apalachin. The FBI were galvanized into action. Hoover immediately commissioned a special report to confirm whether the Mafia actually existed. It declared, "The truth of the matter is the available evidence makes it impossible to deny logically the existence of a criminal organization known as the Mafia, which for generations has plagued the law-abiding citizens of Sicily, Italy, and the United States."
After the Appalachian meeting, the intelligence gathering about organized crime became very much institutionalized inside the FBI. Most of the investigations were intelligence investigations, where we gathered information about who they were and the kinds of activities they were involved with.
As a direct result of the Apalachin raid, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics was instructed to target Vito Genovese in their fight against drugs.
Open up! When you close, come on!
What about the government's charge that you're the right man, that you're the #1 man in this narcotics business?
Charges are fantastic and ridiculous.
You think
That's what they are.
And have you ever known anyone in the narcotics racket? Have you known anyone?
I never did.
On April the 17th, 1959, the man who had gotten away with murder for so long was finally nailed in a Manhattan federal court. Don Vito Genovese was fined $20,000 and sentenced to 15 years in prison for masterminding an international narcotics syndicate that smuggled heroin and cocaine into the United States.
Never underestimate the menace that Vito Genovese left with even with his departure. It was he who was so instrumental, one of the key players in bringing in the scourge of heroin narcotics into America. Without him, it might never have occurred. He opened up these opportunities that the Mafia would use widespread distribution into the inner cities of America, the biggest cities, New York, Chicago. For the first time, you had the mass appeal of a narcotics contagion that enveloped the country. And one person who has to bear some of that responsibility is Don Vito Genovese.
Vito Genovese continued to rule his organization unchallenged from his prison cell. He died there on February the 14th, 1969, of a heart attack. His legacy is that he left behind the most powerful mafia organization in America that bears his name to this day. The Vito Genovese family continues to make millions from its criminal activities. But he left another, more damaging legacy to the mob. Genovese had exposed the Mafia to the FBI. The Appalachin disaster would signal the beginning of their crackdown on organized crime in America.